This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is. The Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It's episode 229 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Make sure you're following Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera86 and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you prefer to be a part of the chat, if you prefer to be a part of the conversation, you're doing that right here on YouTube. You could also do it on X as well. But I like everyone coming on over to the YouTube channel. That makes for a lot of good time here tonight. So make sure you're doing that as well. And a lot of talk about this week, a lot of talk about even today with some of the moves, not really Mets moves, but some moves that probably could affect the Mets eventually. So here to do that with me today is Laura Albanese, a good friend to the show. Great to have you back on. She's the New York Mets beat writer for Newsday, co-host of First Time Listener, Long Time Caller podcast. And I think that you do host Terry Collins' show at sometimes.
I'm a guest on Terry Collins' show because I feel like, it's Terry Collins' show, so he's kind of the host.
Yeah.
I definitely do the TC podcast, and it's a blast.
That's awesome. And congratulations on, officially being the full-time Mets beat writer as you were last season. I had on Tim Healy probably about a week before he left to go to Boston. And it was like the first time I had Tim Healy on in the 5 years I was doing the podcast. I was like, oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. Get him on, multiple times here. And he's off to Boston. So I'm going to have to call him up and get him on once the Red Sox are in town or once they go to Boston. But it's great to have you on here again, Laura. Appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Awesome. So, a lot has gone down over the last week or so with the Mets. And let's start off right off the bat. The Mets bringing in Luke Weaver. A lot of talk about the Mets taking Yankees players and all that. But, I think this is a good deal for the Mets. I think this is a good, backup to what the Mets were originally trying to do and bringing back Edwin Diaz. Obviously, they brought Devin Williams into the fold. But as these guys started dropping, as Diaz went to LA, Suarez left the whole thing, they weren't going to bring back Helsley. You look at who's left. And I think Luke Weaver is probably one of the better pieces to go after. I know he didn't have a great end to the 2025 season. We all know he was hurt, but he's closed. He's had a good postseason, and he's played in New York, and I think that's what's important. He signs a 2-year, $22 million deal. There's no option years or opt-out, so he's going to be a Met for the next 2 years regardless of what happens, I guess outside of being traded. But the Mets get him. Last 2025, I just talked about. He was 4-4 with a 3.62 ERA. He had 8 saves once he took over for Devin Williams, and then he lost that job eventually to David Bednar when they got the trade. 72 strikeouts in 64 2/3 innings pitched. And, a couple of tweets here that I found, for one from Jolly Olive of John Boy and the other Matthew Brownstein of Metsmerize, and they were talking about, Luke Weaver had a 1.5 ERA at the end of maybe before straining his hamstring. Then to the rest of the season, 5.31. And, the struggles that he's had because of the injury kind of lowered his, I guess, value this offseason. What were your thoughts on this? Like, what's your assessment on this signing here? And, what grade would you give this for the Mets and kind of where they're currently stated right now?
Well, it's interesting because before I became the Mets beat writer, I was also covering the Yankees. So I got to see Luke Weaver quite a bit, especially when he kind of ascended into the closer role last year. This is a very talented pitcher. I think one of the most intriguing things is that after his hamstring injury, his velocity actually went up. But the thing that suffered the most, the thing that kind of keyed a little bit of his struggles, was the fact that he wasn't locating as well. And a lot of times when you talk about pitcher mechanics, the intricacies, it's so detailed because one part of the body obviously speaks to the other part of the body, and suddenly your fastball isn't going where it wants to, or your changeup isn't working the way that it wants to. And you did see that with Luke Weaver. I think now, because he did rush back after his injury, everyone was kind of shocked because it was like he came back after 17 days when everyone said there was going to be like a 6-week injury.
Yeah.
So when you're in that situation, I feel now with some time to kind of regroup, you can probably see the Luke Weaver that we saw in 2024. And that's a pretty good back end of the bullpen. I think at this point, we've talked to death about how the peripherals on Devin Williams indicate that he was far better than he actually was last year, even though, again, I covered the Yankees for the first half of the season. And when he got hit, he got hit. It wasn't like a mirage. No, guys were really we're really kind of like wailing on him. But him and Luke Weaver both had similar issues that they kind of like indicated when they would talk to the media, which is the possibility that they were tipping pitches. So when you're talking about a guy who mostly throws a fastball and a changeup, possibly tipping a pitch, and obviously the possibility of Devin Williams between fastball and changeup as well, tipping a pitch, that's going to be a really big problem for guys in that situation. So if they rectified that, I think that's really important. And the two things that really stand out for both of these guys is that they struggled in New York. They were able to have a little bit of success. Luke Weaver had a lot of success. Devin Williams was better towards the second half of the season. They could have gone to a small market team, and they decided to stay here. And I do feel that does speak to their ability to pitch in New York, pitch in big game situations. They want to be here. And so between those two and AJ Minter, who will probably have a little bit of a delayed start to a season, but like everyone's forgotten about AJ Minter. This guy is really, really good.
Yeah.
So you have that kind of like back end of the bullpen, and then you have like Weaver kind of like going in and weaving, for lack of a better term, weaving in and out, depending on the situation. This is a guy who can go multiple innings. I believe in the last 3 seasons, he's in the top 3 of innings pitched among relievers. He's basically a guy who can do it all. I'm not mad about this. If you put their WAR all together, it makes for an Edwin Diaz. Is it Edwin Diaz? Would Edwin Diaz have been better? Yes, absolutely. But since that's not on the table, you kind of deal with the cards that you were dealt. And I think that Luke Weaver is a good kind of supplement to this.
I think if the Mets came out and were like, yeah, we're not going to go, Edwin Diaz's price is too much, we're not going to go out for him. I think if they would have still signed these two guys, I think maybe it would have had a little bit more of a better feel to it. But because Diaz, there was this whole talk of bringing Diaz back, and what the contract was with the Dodgers that the Mets didn't want to match, that everyone is not a fan of what they have done. I like it just as much as you. And I think that, with Luke Weaver coming back so early, a lot of it had to do with the fact that Devin Williams was struggling so badly to start the season. And, with Weaver, I think he posted 3.62 ERA over the first 64 games of the season. And then in his worst performance, like you mentioned, like if he was bad, it was bad. 0.1 innings pitched. He had 5 earned runs. That was on September 15th. If he didn't have that, his ERA would have been 2.94 for the season. So, he's a pretty solid pitcher out of the bullpen, and he pitches in New York. I think that's, like you mentioned, that is so huge. You look at that season in 2024, that breakout season, 2.89 ERA, and he had 103 strikeouts in 84 innings pitched. That's pretty big, and that's something that I think David Stearns looks into when it comes to getting these guys throwing strikes, getting outs. He was lights out in the World Series. He had 3 saves in the wild card, or actually in the ALDS against Kansas City. So he pitches pretty well in the bullpen. Just got to get him healthy, and like you mentioned about locating pitches there. Shout out, we almost have 200 people in this room in this stream. Any comments and questions, throw them out here, and we'll get to looking at them. The Mets now have the Yankees' 3 previous closers, Clay Holmes, Devin Williams, and Luke Weaver.
May I just say, I cannot wait for the day where Clay Holmes starts a game, then Luke Weaver comes in, and then Devin Williams closes it out, and just going to be just like Yankees closers as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, I could see something like that happening, and that's something that we'll see on the news and on in newspapers and be talked about by Yankee fans. And I hope it works out, because that's something that definitely, like, the whole game has to work out for the Mets. But it doesn't seem to bother me that David Stearns is bringing in players from the Bronx, especially when it's working out. Like, you look at Luis Severino, 11-7, 3.91 ERA. Clay Holmes last year, 12-9. Juan Soto, we know his season, 43 homers, 105 RBIs, 38 stolen bases. He almost went 40-40 last season. You know, it really shouldn't matter how many Yankees we bring over here as long as they succeed.
I agree, and I'm kind of like a little bit confused about this whole thing. Like, oh, I go on Twitter or X, what do you call it? And people are like, oh, you're taking everything that the Yankees kind of cast away. The Yankees did not cast away Juan Soto. I mean, like, if they get Cody Bellinger, is everyone going to cry about the fact that Cody Bellinger was a Yankee once? I mean, this is the nature of the game. And one of the things, like, you look at a guy like Devin Williams, David Stearns knows Devin Williams. So he's able to possibly like identify the idea that, okay, there was a reason that Devin struggled last year, and let's look at his peripheral numbers and let's look at everything else. It is actually good to know that the players that you're onboarding onto your team. And I don't think this is bad. I understand why some fans can be upset, but I promise you, in this age of analytics and this age of optimization where you have all the data in the world, it's not like David Stearns is going, well, like I saw him because he played like 10 miles away. That's not how baseball works. These are just players that they like. And apparently, I mean, like if you look at Carlos Mendoza, obviously he worked with the Yankees, worked with player development. There is a lot of kind of, intermingling of data and how things work. And the fact of the matter is, I think for a long time, and I saw this a lot when I was playing with when I was covering the Yankees, for a long time, there was this devaluation of the idea of who can play or pitch or whatever in New York. And I think there might be more to that in recent years, where it's like, there is a very specific skill set in playing in New York.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can do it, that is to your credit. It took Ryan Helsley a while. Like, I thought Ryan Helsley was going to like turn it around, and he actually did end up turning it around. But the Mets could not re-sign Ryan Helsley because there was such a this kind of like black mark to him, even though he turned his season around towards the very tail end of the season. So when you're talking about the ability of a player to kind of like rise to the occasion, and in Devin Williams's case, fail pretty spectacularly in the early going, and figure it out and kind of have that gumption and kind of have that ability, that's important. As much as we want to talk about pitch mix and like all this other stuff, there is a psychological aspect to baseball, and the fact that you can play in New York and you can pitch in New York is important.
Honestly, that's my biggest criteria. If you could play in New York, that's why, to me, losing Pete Alonso is so huge. And even Edwin Diaz, like, look at how Edwin Diaz started. Like, he had the Devin Williams start, right? That went on for a year. It basically cost the Mets a postseason spot in 2019, how bad Edwin Diaz was. And he figured out how to turn it around and make himself better. And he really became a Met. And Pete Alonso was always a Met. And it's hard to lose those guys that can play here. Now you got to replace them, and it makes it a whole lot harder. So the fact that these guys can play in New York, I think experience in this tough market is huge. I know back in, I think it was 2023 when Judge was a free agent, it was like, I don't know how true it was to the fact that, there was this, Steve Cohen was not going to go after Judge and leave that away. And, now going after these players, go and get the good players that are on the Yankees. If you can get them, get them. If you can get Cody Bellinger, get Cody Bellinger. I want all of the best players that can hack it in New York being on this team.
I tend to agree. I do feel like the media narrative is overblown. Like, oh my God, the New York media is so rough, But then I'll go on the road, and it's not that we're like these horrific human beings. They're just like grilling. No, we're not. But there's a lot of us. And there's a very big difference from making a mistake and talking to 2 people, and making a mistake and talking to 15 people with 4 cameras on you. There's a lot to be said about that. The ability to take accountability, understanding that everything that you say can go on a back page. It's not because we're targeting things, but that's a lot. It is so much. And the idea that you can face failure. One of my favorite things that I heard about Devin Williams, and which is probably not a favorite thing for fans, but the favorite thing that I heard is like, he got more open and more honest and more willing to speak to the media the harder he struggled. I think that's a green flag. I think that's really important. Yeah. And then to struggle like that and be like, actually, no, I really like New York and I want to try this again. Mind you, New York was the source of his 2 biggest career failures. Sure, it was with the Brewers, but he gave up that home run to Pete Alonso. That's New York. So all of New York knows that. Then he comes to the Yankees and he struggles immediately. That's New York. And he's like, no, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And he gets better. It speaks to his character, and I think that's probably a very good sign.
And you would think because of what happened in Milwaukee against the Mets in 2024 and what happened with the Yankees last year, and the fact that he really didn't know if he was going to be the closer or not, right? Like the model was to have Diaz close, to have Devin Williams set up. So the fact that he even took a setup job where he could have been a closer anywhere else, and so could have Luke Weaver. Like let's any
100%.
team would have taken these guys, and the fact that they decided to stay here, I think says a lot about them as like you mentioned, as character players.
Yeah, I mean, like I ran into Devin Williams over at the winter meetings in Orlando, and it was right after the news about Edwin Diaz broke. And so it was me and like two other reporters. I'm like, hey, and he was very honest. He was like, well, in his introductory press conference, he said that basically every team that talked to him about being a closer. But then we're like, were you surprised about Edwin Diaz? He's like, honestly, yeah, I was expecting him to come back and he would have been okay with the setup role. The thing is that if you like erase last season, Devin Williams is one of the best closers in baseball. And
a lot of people say the best.
Yeah.
Him
and Edwin very much high up there. In terms of WAR, they had similar WAR. If you go to like from 2020, which was when Devin Williams won Rookie of the Year, to this year, I believe him and Edwin Diaz had the exact same WAR. Like we are talking about a truly valuable reliever. And this was a guy who was like, I expected them to bring back Edwin Diaz and I would pitch whenever. That's pretty good. And so now, and then, asked him about like, okay, so how do you feel about being the presumptive closer? He's like, I've got to earn it. I've got to earn that role. So he's still in kind of a fighting mentality. And you're talking about a guy who has a whole lot of skill. And that's kind of what you want to see in any athlete, but you certainly want to see that in a reliever. Like he still thinks he needs to earn his spot.
And I think the best way for David Stearns to handle this and the coaching staff is to have more versatile relievers that have closers experience and that can close. Devin Williams, obviously one of them. Luke Weaver, we mentioned. They even have this guy that's coming back from Tommy John surgery, Adbert Alzay. He was the Cubs closer and saved 22 games. Maybe he'll be a big part of the bullpen. You mentioned AJ Minter. He'll probably get a save opportunity. Brooks Raley, I'm pretty sure will get a save opportunity himself. So they're making the bullpen more versatile, which is good. Obviously, they need more front end pitching pieces. That'll be yet to be determined. But you mentioned Cody Bellinger, and that's the next guy I want to get into right now. So maybe the Mets can pry away another Yankee. And, it's not just about that. It's the fact that he fits a criteria that David Stearns wants, and that's versatility. He could play first base if you need him to. Obviously, he plays very good outfield. His defense is great. He's in the 93rd percentile in outs above average. His arm value is 91%, arm strength at 83rd percent. Last season with the Yankees, 272, 29 home runs, 98 RBIs, and an 813 OPS. Most importantly, with runners in scoring position, 348. I mean, that's something that we didn't even have on this team outside of maybe Brandon Nimmo, who hit over 300 for a while, and Pete Alonso to a certain extent.
He was up in the top in terms of risk.
Yeah, and both of those are gone now. So
you do need guys who are able to produce. The fact that Cody Bellinger can play first base, like as much as I did like the Jorge Polanco signing. I think that was a very smart signing. I will die on the hill that first base is harder to play than everyone thinks it is.
It is.
And the fact that Polanco can just he's only played one major league game there, but he's a middle infielder. Let's just throw him in there. I actually asked Terry Collins about that. He's like, it's so hard to play first base, and it's so important. And you need soft hands, and middle infielders do okay at it. Catchers do the best at it because they understand how to receive balls, but it's an extremely important job. So having a guy who can slot into first base defensively is really important. I'm not going to throw, personally, if it's me, Mark Vientos at first base when he is your weakest defensive player. I think that's going to be a trouble. Jeff McNeil can do it, absolutely. But it's still kind of a platoon situation. So having a guy like Cody Bellinger who's able to slot in is super important. That being said, and I've said this time, I am 100% pro player. Get your bag, get your money. whatever else. Cody Bellinger's market, I feel like, is going to be very inflated because he fits so many teams. And so many teams want him. The Yankees want him back. The Dodgers wouldn't mind him. The Mets. These are all really high spending teams.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a guy who, frankly, like he is a fantastic defender. He pulls the ball in the air, lefty bat, great with runners in scoring position, all this other stuff. But his hard hit rate has gone down. His barrel rate has gone down. All these other things have gone down. You have to wonder, how is that going to age? Because Cody Bellinger is not going to be taking a 2-year deal. He's going to be taking a long-year deal. How is this going to age? If you're not willing to give Pete Alonso a 5-year deal, are you willing to give Cody Bellinger a 5-year deal? And if so, why? So it's a little bit of a conundrum. Cody Bellinger would be great on this team for the next 2 to 3 years. How is he going to be in 5 years? How is he going to be in 6 years? So that's going to be the question, especially if they in any way believe in Ryan Clifford, especially if they're going to continue to look at first baseman in the free agent market. So I don't know how that's going to necessarily work out. And do you spend the money elsewhere? Do you spend it on starting pitching instead? I don't think they're going to throw it at Alex Bregman. They're really in on Brett Beatty right now at third base. So it's a little bit of a complicated situation, but there is going to be a bidding war. And I'm not 100% sure how that's going to fit, especially with David Stearns' philosophy of not necessarily throwing money away. He's not against spending money. From what I can gather, he's against giving long-term contract to players in his 30s if he can help it.
Yeah, and that's the thing where the criteria doesn't fit, right? If Bellinger is asking, and the rumor was 6 years, 180 million, you could have gave less of that to bring back Pete Alonso, who's already been proven to be a good Met and has the power. And honestly, he's probably been more healthier than Cody Bellinger's been.
100%. Yeah, Cody Bellinger is defensively superior. Absolutely, but he also doesn't have the power. We talk about run prevention. You got to score runs as well. Cody Bellinger is a great hitter, but Pete Alonso, I do believe, will continue to produce offensively at this level for quite a bit of time.
And I think it was Jack Curry on Yankees Hot Stove that mentioned that no team has come close to what Cody Bellinger's wanted yet. So, we'll see what happens with the contract for him. I think a big deal too is most likely, right, we're going to have a lockout next season, like possibly a full season lockout. So you're losing a year. Like you can chop one of those years off. You're going to lose that from the players, and that I'm pretty sure that is taking into effect on what David Stearns is feeling and how he is going to go about bringing in free agent. We've seen a lot of 2-year deals, a lot of 3-year deals with what he's been doing so far. Maybe that changes once the lockout's over. Maybe once we have, a little more finality on what is going to happen with this lockout, if it happens or not, maybe David Stearns thinks about, giving a bigger contract, probably not to pitchers over 30, but like if it's a young pitcher like Yamamoto, when they were going to offer 13, 14 years for a 25-year-old, that's something different.
Right. But players also don't get paid during the lockout. And so that's another issue. And so I did ask Scott Boras about this, and he's like, historically speaking, it hasn't really changed negotiations. I don't know if that's changed at all. I'm not part of kind of like that ecosphere. So it will be interesting to see. But I mean, like David Stearns' philosophy has been pretty set. Lockout, no lockout. He does not like giving long contract to pitchers because pitchers get hurt. And kind of like that's the long and short of it. He does not necessarily like giving long contracts to guys in their 30s who are especially like power hitters, because there has been, notable decline with guys who profile in that way. And that's understandable. That being said, you have to come to the reality that, this is a market where sometimes you're going to have to pay for the declining years of a player. When Juan Soto's at the end of his 15-year contract, he's not going to be the Juan Soto he is now. Yeah. And you have to be okay with that. That is part of the business of signing free agents, because typically when, they're not all Juan Soto. Typically when guys go into free agency, they are in their late 20s, early 30s. And that means that you are getting them right at their prime, but you're also going to have them right at their decline.
Common question here from my friend Hector here, Blunt Thoughts. He's asking you, does this feel like a bridge year for David Stearns where they try to be competitive, but not yet ready to contend for a World Series a couple of years away?
I don't think I don't think David Stearns can afford that. I don't think he can afford a bridge year, frankly. Last year was supposed to be the year that they competed for a World Series. It was an abject disaster. Now there are a million reasons why it was a disaster, and some of them are not David Stearns' fault. Guys get hurt. You can't really predict it. Things don't pan out. Guys regress, all these other things. But you can't go from a World Series like caliber team, $341 million payroll, second highest in baseball, and then go to a bridge year. I think this might be the most pivotal offseason of David Stearns' career up to now until next year. Everyone was like, oh, the Juan Soto of the year, but Juan Soto was just one guy. David Stearns has to build this entire team from the studs up, and it's not in a way that's going to be a rebuild. He needs to build a team that can win, because anything less than that is going to be a failure.
And if he was totally rebuilding, Lindor is probably on the market. All right,
yeah,
you're just stripping everything down. It's like
is,
Soto and the kids.
Right. And people look at they trade Brandon Nimmo's contract. Brandon Nimmo's a fantastic player. Brandon Nimmo's contract was not going to age well.
No.
It simply was not.
I was okay with that too. I was okay. That was the one when they talked about let's break up the core here, I'm like, man, if they could find a way to trade Brandon Nimmo's contract, because we saw how he played last season, you saw the body deteriorating. If they can get rid of that huge money, that's probably the contract you trade.
Yeah, it is. And it was so funny. Everyone kept talking about trading Jeff McNeil. Jeff McNeil costs a lot less. And because of his versatility right now, and because the Mets have so many holes on their roster, he's so much more valuable. Because if they can't find a left fielder, Jeff McNeil could play left field. If they can't find a first, Jeff McNeil could play first base. This stuff is actually important.
Yeah, and that's offensive stats aside. They need the bodies.
You need a person who can actually do the thing. And so and he doesn't cost a lot. So when they were talking about breaking up the core, everyone immediately went to Jeff McNeil. I'm like, nah, I think it's going to be Brandon Nimmo.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we'll see how they kind of put the rest of this team here together. At the end of the day, do you think that the Mets end up with Cody Bellinger?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the Yankees will push pretty hard to bring Bellinger back. I think he fits Yankee Stadium really, really well, far better than he fits Citi Field. I think there are going to be other options. We did hear David Stearns hammering home the idea that they think Carson Bench could be a true option in the outfield. That said, they need something. The Luis Robert rumors are kind of heating up, so that's possible. But Luis Robert, he's just another Tyrone Taylor, essentially, if you look at the numbers. So I don't know how much that kind of gets your heart pumping.
They're hoping for 2022, 2023, Robert, where he had that one really good power season.
Right.
Not consistent enough.
It's so hard to look at these guys and be like, okay, they can replicate this unicorn year. So that's going to be interesting. You don't want to overpay on something like that. Do you really want to give a Jonah Tong or a Brandon Spurt for that? So that's going to be interesting. I know they're pushing for Bellinger. I just don't know that they'll push that far, because, give Stearns credit for this. He is not overly sentimental. He's not overly emotional. He's not overly reactive. So, in a past universe with different front office, different owner, the Mets would have lost that on Edwin Diaz and hugely overpaid for Pete Alonso. Because, you don't want to lose the back page. You don't want to be seen as the people who just completely destroy a team. While I do think they should have brought back Pete Alonso, I think 5 years, 155 is a tough ask. So they did not act out of emotion. And I don't think you can expect them to start acting out of emotion now and be like, oh, let me just throw all this money at Cody Bellinger just because we need one big splashy signing. There are other ways to build a team.
Yeah. And when they offered Pete that, 7-year deal, that was under Epler. when Epler was still general manager, and that wasn't just going to happen. Like, they weren't going to do it last year for Pete. I had the same feelings this year. So unless Pete was going to take another 2 or 3 year deal, which he didn't want, he got what he wanted from Baltimore, and now he's a Orioles. So he's moved on, and the Mets got to do the same thing. And it seems like David Stearns feels that way anyway. Mike as Mets says, if the Mets don't make the playoffs in 2026, it'll be time to move on from Stearns. Now, I have a feeling that Stearns is going to be here throughout the length of this, no matter what happens. Maybe if it's like the final year and they still haven't made the playoffs, maybe there will be a time to fire him. But Steve Cohen really wanted David Stearns for such a long time. I don't think he just automatically says, you know what, we're done with him.
I don't think so either. I think if there's going to be a sacrificial lamb this year, it's going to be Carlos Mendoza. His contract is up anyway at the end of the season. Like, you're in a position, Mendoza's in a position right now, unfortunately, because I don't think most of this was his fault, where he really has to hope, pray that his players produce in the correct way, while also doing it with a completely new coaching staff. I feel like, and I think we saw it time and time again, Steve Cohen is a billionaire for a reason. And one of the reasons that he's a billionaire is that, one, sometimes he takes emotion out of it. A lot of times he takes emotion out of his decisions, but also he hires people for a reason. So he hired David Stearns to do a job. He is not going to micromanage a guy that he trusts to do this job. He is giving Stearns the keys to the castle. He's saying, do what you want. He is giving him this season, is my perception. I do not think if this is a failure, I don't think David Stearns goes away. I think if it carries on to 2027, then possibly not. But I mean, Steve Cohen very specifically searched out David Stearns. He waited for him. This is a guy that he thought can build this team and can make a champion and can make a sustainable champion. He's not going to give up the ghost when there are so many other factors involved in terms of just like, well, maybe the coaching staff wasn't right. Maybe the manager isn't right. There are other things before that, before David Stearns even becomes like an issue in terms of being on the chopping block.
I think a lot of fans forget the hardship of just trying to get to the point to get Stearns. I mean, I know we had Epler for the couple of years, but we went through general managers. We went through, it was just so much just to get to him. Nobody was allowed to talk to the Mets. They weren't allowed to get any interviews. There was no one helping out David Stearns. And when this finally came through that he was able to get Stearns, I don't think he's just going to, I think it's like you said, he's going to give him this year. Even Armand in the chat, he believes the team missing the playoffs and reported losing money. Cohen got pissed and handed the keys and the roster over to Stearns. We saw what happened, like when Cohen tried getting involved, right, with the whole Correa thing, and they had to reel him back in. Obviously, he can do whatever he wants. He has the money. Right. He could sign Cody Bellinger if he wants. He could sign, a whole bunch of players.
Painting and sign Cody Bellinger if he wants. Like that's all it takes.
Yeah. So he could do that whenever he wants, but. I think David Stearns is kind of saying, you know what, things haven't worked out the ways that you guys have been doing it in the past. Let's do it my way, and we'll see if we can get this done.
I frankly think that's fair. Like you can disagree with David Stearns, and I understand the fans 100% who disagree with David Stearns. I see where they're coming from, but you hired a guy to do a job. Micromanaging that guy is only going to make everything worse. Because it's everyone second guessing. And like, if there's no one person who's just calling the shots, who's not constantly looking over his shoulder, then you can't really fully take the vision and make it reality. So I think at this point, you really do have to give him the chance to build this team. And the one thing about Stearns is that, like, whether you love him, whether you hate him, this took guts. Like, trading Brandon Nimmo took guts.
It's something different, right? We're all
took guts. If this fails, it's going to be a gigantic failure. And he knows that. He's not dumb. He knows that his name is going to be all over that. He's going to be the guy that ruined the Mets, that took the heart out of the team, that took the heart out of the franchise. If it succeeds, then you're like, all right, maybe he's a genius. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like this comment here from Armando Gomez saying someone probably showed Cohen the Knicks when Dolan was hands-on versus now with him being hands-off. So maybe this is the time for Stearns to really put his stamp on this team. There was the evaluation period of the kids that they had and who they have in the minors and growing the minors to now being a top 5. Some have ESPN has a top 1 farm system. And, now he can start looking at trades and he can start figuring out what he wants to do with some of these homegrown guys, like he did with, letting Pete go and not having sentimentality to guys like Edwin Diaz. It's a different perspective and a different way that this team is doing things that they haven't done in the past, right? That anytime there's always sentimentality, we would overpay for some of the guys that we had and it doesn't work out in the end. And we have not had a World Series to show for 40 years. So I'm all about change and seeing things happen different. I'm going to trust him to do his thing, but now this is on him. So if he messes up, it's 100% on him.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, and this is the thing since I started covering sports and I've been doing this for a long time now. And the one thing that fascinated me the most is like generationally bad teams. You look like a team like the Jets or something like that, where it's just kind of like, okay, so you changed ownership and you changed like general manager and you changed personnel and you changed players and everything. And somehow things still don't work. Why? If you could change everything, and it's because sometimes it comes from the top down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the ownership is not working. And I don't think Steve Cohen wants to be that type of owner. I don't think he wants to be the type of owner that gives like generational trauma to a legion of fans for decades upon decades upon decades because he keeps doing things the same way. It simply doesn't work. So, look, I've been on SNY and all these. I was on the forefront. Like, I do think the Mets should bring back Edwin Diaz. I think there is value to bringing back Pete Alonso. Maybe not for 5 years, but certainly for 4. I thought there was value in these things. But if, that's the definition of badness, to keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. So now they're trying something different. And I do understand that the fans are sad and, this is upsetting. And this is not the team that stole their hearts in 2024. And that is 100% valid. But you kind of just have to sit back and see how it works out.
Well, even as Brad say, if they ran back the same team and they brought the guys back and they didn't succeed, we all be upset about it. Yeah. It's just the nature of the game. Armand's question here before we move on to the next topic here is asking, do you think that's if Will Stearns hire a general manager, to have that one main voice and bounce ideas off of?
I don't think so. I mean, and this is 100% personal opinion, but the way that Stearns works is he keeps his circle small. This is the type of guy who he doesn't leak things. He is very into and onto himself. If he hires a general manager, that's fine. But I do think he kind of wants his fingerprints on the process. And I do think he enjoys that part of the job. So, and every time we've asked him, he's kind of poo-pooed it or been like, maybe, which to me just means no. So that's my personal opinion. I might be wrong. I've been wrong in the past and I will be wrong again. But no, I don't see him hiring a GM.
I want to get into one more, former Yankee that the Mets had their eyes on. And that was Michael King. He signed with and returned to the San Diego Padres. I think it was Mark Feinsand of MLB.com and Jeff Passan, 3 years, $75 million. He's got a player option for 2027, 2028. Obviously, the draft pick was saddled along with him. And I feel like the contract and the money is David Stearns, right? 3 years, that's $75 million, perfect. But you're talking about a guy that has an injury history. The fact that there's all these opt-outs, especially after the first year, you don't want to lose a draft pick to that.
I don't know. I mean, the Mets farm system at this point is so strong. And it is so hard to predict who's going to be good. This is not the NFL draft. This is not the NBA draft. You can, the number of high MLB draft picks who did nothing is pretty substantial. So, I mean, a guy like Michael King, especially for such a short period of time, essentially being told, hey, prove it. This dude so he battled thoracic thoracic nerve issues this year.
At the Harvey injury, the same as Matt Harvey?
So essentially, like, not the exact same injury, but he had issues with thoracic nerve. So he had that, and then he had a knee injury, and he still pitched through a 3.44 ERA. The 3 years prior to that, he had a sub-3 ERA. He has, a 5 or 6 pitch mix? Like, and the idea that you can get someone like that, forget the money. The money doesn't matter at this point. I mean, the Mets payroll is at $305 million right now. They have plenty of room, especially when Cohen says that, he's willing to match last year's payroll, which was 340. There's plenty of room. Michael King would have been a fantastic addition. He can pitch in New York because he did it already. He had some injury history, but it's not extensive. And the idea of him in that rotation, that would have been fantastic. Especially for the low number of years with the opt-outs, with various other things. That was one of those, it was kind of like a head scratcher, where it's like, I'm not sure if Michael King just wanted to go back to the Padres and be like, hey, I like it here or whatever else. But man, I had that guy circled as like, that would be a great fit for the Mets.
Well, it feels like we're always just checking in on players. That's what I see every time on X. Oh, the Mets are checking in on Michael King. They're checking in on this guy, and then they end up being on some other team. But Green Machine here, because this guy was mentioned on the last show and has been talked about when there was these rumors of possible trade with the Padres. Does the Padres retaining King now make it more likely that they'd be willing to deal a pitcher like Pivetta, especially since they have to cut down on payroll?
I personally think so. Like, I haven't heard anything to that effect, but like, we had already heard the Mets are interested in Nick Pivetta. So you have Nick Pivetta. All right. So he's owed, it's a little bit more than $20 million next year, but then that he can opt out the next 2 years of his contract. The Padres don't want that. And now the rotation is a little bit more stabilized with Michael King in it. They could get a lot for Nick Pivetta and then kind of like cut their losses there, because frankly, that team can be strong without him, and the Mets would be better with Nick Pivetta. Would I prefer the Mets with Michael King? Yes. Do I think Nick Pivetta is a good pivot? Also, yes. So yeah, I do think that makes it more of a possibility. The Mets bullpen is also like, I understand that Michael King's a starter, but already if you're going to solidify the pitcher, suddenly a Jeremiah Estrada. Yeah. Interesting. This guy has great stuff. A Mason Miller, obviously. Like, these are guys now that when you solidify your rotation, you can feel a little bit more comfortable possibly dealing bullpen pieces.
I even talked about on the last show Ramon Laureano for the outfield, because I know that obviously we talk about Cody Bellinger, but the Mets do need a left fielder. So
yes, they actually do need human bodies to play on the baseball field that aren't all second basemen, believe it or not.
I wouldn't be surprised if we hear Polanco is taking some reps out of left field. We know Beatty's done it before as well, and
Luis and Acuna. Everyone has an outfield glove.
Maybe that's a prerequisite. Maybe the Mets hand these guys outfielders gloves as a gift before the season begins.
I guess it's like potpourri, but like I did ask like David Stearns like towards the end of the season, or I'm like, all right, so obviously you guys love versatility. Are you ever concerned, because he was talking about run prevention? What's the level of concern that all this like kind of like focus on versatility actually hurts your defense, because you have so many guys playing out of position, and even the guys who are playing in position are not getting as many reps on the major league level, which I know, okay, you've been playing second base since you were like in the womb, but playing second base all through like the minor leagues is different than playing second base in the major league level. And suddenly you're a second baseman, a third baseman, and a left fielder. Like,
yeah.
And I don't know when we hit the point of diminishing returns with versatility.
Yeah. No, let's be honest too. Like, even Francisco Lindor did not have a good season defensively. And part of it has to do with who he's surrounded by on his left side and on his right side. But you at least want to have some competent defenders that look like Brett Beatty is going to take reins of third base, and which I'm fine with. That's one less position we have to worry with. And I think he's earned it. I think he earned it after that second half. Let's see if he could do it for a full season now and, run away with it. And then you got Marcus Semien now, who's a pretty good defender, although a couple years older. Maybe he can solidify second base. And then obviously, who knows the carousel around at first base. Because I truly don't believe 100% that Polanco is the first baseman. I mean, maybe I know Seattle, I think Will Salmon wrote about this. Seattle was kind of priming him to play first base, and then they got Josh Naylor. But, still that's not, he's not really playing any time there. And
No.
there's the scoops that have to be made that Pete Alonso is making. I know, if Pete Alonso is struggling throwing to first base and having the yips, how about a guy who's never played first base at all in his life?
It is incredibly difficult. And I feel like the metrics that define like a good defensively solid first baseman, it's difficult because so essentially Pete Alonso got huge nicks because of his range. He does not have good range, but he also went after balls that he probably should not have gone after, which affected his statistics. When you talk about Francisco Lindor's poor defense this year, he whiffed on not a lot, but a handful of what would be considered statistically easy plays. And that tanks your score immediately because everything is weighted. So when you talk about like defensive metrics, it's a little bit tricky to say like who's a good defender and who's a bad defender. I prefer the eye test sometimes over even a lot of the numbers that I'm seeing because I'm just like, okay, no, I get it. Pete Alonso can't move to his right. I understand that. Pete Alonso saved Mark Vientos more times than I could count when he was just throwing balls every which way from third base. So I mean, like it's complicated. It's one of those things which like I'm very much, I love analytics, I love the metrics, I love all this other stuff, but you really do have to trust your eyes sometimes too.
That seems to. I hope David Stearns considers that when he's picking this roster. Like you mentioned, he's talked about run prevention all off season, and then we get a guy who's never played first base. It's just some things you tend to question when you're putting together this roster.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, and that was the first thing. So I was at the Queens Baseball Convention when the Jorge Polanco news came through, and I was just again like I was a little bit confused. Like, well, they're going to make him a first baseman and a DH. I'm like, okay, but who's going to be your actual first baseman?
Yeah.
So I would not put Mark Vientos there personally. I would not hate Jeff McNeil there, but he is not a first baseman. At this point, like I'm like, all right, just get Carlos Santana, get Paul Goldschmidt for a year until Ryan Clifford is like good enough, or there's a better free agent or something else. Because I can't perceive of a world where you just throw someone. Like you look at the infield, the best infield of all time, where you had Robin Ventura, Ray Ordonez, Edgardo Alfonso, John Olerud, and everyone looks at all these other guys like Ray Ordonez is the best shortstop. Dude, they were great because John Olerud was really, really great too. Like that was important. And everyone seems to discount this position, which is flabbergasting to me.
It's crazy to say there's an art to playing first base, but there really is an art to playing first base. You talk, if you watch highlights of John Olerud and how he manned first base, I went on a whole conversation about it when I had Bobby Valentine on the show. That's like how important John Olerud was to this team.
It was so important. And everyone's like, well, no, you can just stick everyone in first base. Like, no, you can't, guys.
No. And let's get into some of the other needs you mentioned already that the Mets need here. They need another bat, right? We talk about a front end starter, middle relief. With the signing of Jorge Polanco, I think that the Mets are not done at first base. Like we both seem to agree that they definitely need a first baseman. And some of these guys now are off the board. I don't know how much Murakami was. I wasn't really into it. I know he's more of a third baseman, but he signs a 2-year, $34 million deal with the White Sox.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the biggest problem to me is he strikes out a lot. Then you have Wilson Contreras. That was the guy that I was kind of really wanting. And you mentioned earlier about catchers becoming first baseman. This is a good prime example of a good catcher becoming a pretty good first baseman. And he's going to Boston now. So you have to wonder, like, obviously Yandy Diaz is out there in Tampa. You mentioned Paul Goldschmidt. I know when Tim Healy first said, oh, they could go with a McNeil, Goldschmidt at first, I'm like, I can't get with this. And now we're at a point where, you know what? I might take that over having to see Polanco, take first reps at first base.
I mean, like, do you go for Ryan O'Hearn? But how is Ryan O'Hearn not going to command a pretty big contract?
Yeah.
Like, that's the question. And then you're going to have the idea of just like, okay, so we have a first baseman that is not as good as Pete Alonso, but we're also paying him a hell of a lot of money for a long time because like, and he's 32 years old. So, and the best available options, if you don't go through the trade market, which I'm not 100% sure which first basemen are available in the trade market, you either go for the Cody Bellinger route or you go for the old guys. And I hate to call them the old guys, but they're the old guys.
Well, and there's also, I think his window is maybe either January 1st or January 4th. Akamoto's out there. He's another guy that the Mets maybe could take a chance on. I mean, I think if he gets somewhere around what Murakami got, I think that's a fair contract to get to at least try out there.
I guess, but you still need to make up this offense. I mean, you're not just making up Alonso's offense; you're making up Brandon Nimmo's offense.
There's no way. There's no way to recover the Pete Alonso offense.
There is not. I mean, like I understand that RBIs are very dependent on like the situation, whatever else. But you just talk straight home runs. Just talk like weighted runs created plus. You're already so deep in the hole. Polanco helped a lot in terms of like at least making up the Brandon Nimmo part of it and a little bit of Alonso, but not enough. And so where are you getting these runs? Because, for as many times as Juan Soto gets on base, somebody needs to drive him in. He can't be, Juan Soto is either walking or hitting solo home runs.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. I don't care what anyone says. He was fantastic last year. He was almost part of the 40-40 club and everybody undervalues it, but he can't win a game by himself.
No. And he struggled in the clutch too.
He did. He was one of the Mets' worst hitters with runners in scoring position, but he also didn't have a whole lot of opportunities with runners in scoring position because people didn't get in scoring position.
Yeah. This is going to be very interesting on how they do this. Like I said, replacing Pete Alonso's production, like the Mets have maybe once a decade have had a power hitter like Pete, right? You talk Dow Strawberry, Mike Piazza, and Pete Alonso.
For a second. Yeah. And that's it.
That's really
Carlos
it.
Delgado a little bit, and like you had these guys, but like in terms of it's not just the production.
Yeah,
I remember growing up and watching both the Mets and the Yankees, and there were certain players when they got in the on deck circle that you could tell the other pitcher was sweating, and I had not seen that again until Pete Alonso and Aaron Judge got on the scene. Obviously, Alex Rodriguez, huge. But the physical imposition of a guy like a Pete Alonso in the on-deck circle, a guy like an Aaron, that does something to pitchers. And I do think that's undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they talk about like a guy who protects somebody else in the lineup, it also, like baseball is a psychological game. Knowing that if you don't get this one guy out, who in this case was like Juan Soto, which good luck. You have to deal with Pete Alonso, who get hit to the friggin' moon. That's an issue. And now the Mets don't have that.
Yeah. And when you have a guy like that, he automatically makes the person in front of him better. Like Alfonso to Piazza or, Beltran till Delgado. It's always like a 1-2 punch when you have someone that provides that kind of pop in the lineup, and the Mets aren't going to have that. And who knows when the next time they will have that. Maybe it has to be signing a free agent to another 12, 15 year type deal, but it's just not going to happen. I mean, Igor has a good about bringing in a guy like Bregman or Bellinger, still doesn't kind of replace Alonso, but it helps the offense to score runs because they're going to need it.
But neither of them bring the offensive production that Alonso did.
Yep.
Which is, when I saw the 5 years, $155 million with the Orioles, I'm like, well, probably no one got close to that. And as far as I can tell, nobody did. But the idea that the Mets didn't even offer 4 years, they probably should have. If they could have just given 4 years, maybe there would have been a conversation there.
But no offer at all is just
no offer at all. So
just tells you what David Stern's mindset is.
Which, hey, like he is putting all his chips on the table. He's going all in, but it's risky because at a certain point, it's not about how smart you are. It's not about how much you can deal. It's not about anything else except where the players want to go. And eventually you run out of options. So if you don't offer Pete Alonso a contract because you think you're going to get A, B, C, and D, what if another Edwin Diaz situation pops up where you offer Edwin Diaz money and he's like, honestly, I don't feel valued here, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And I'm not going to give you a chance to even counteroffer. That can happen with whoever else he's targeting too. And that's where you start getting into like a really dangerous territory.
A guy that mainly Mets has brought up here, has really not been talked about a lot, especially around the New York Mets. Eugenio Suarez as a possible replacement for somewhat of Pete's offense.
I mean, sure, it's possible, but I haven't heard anything to that effect. So I mean, like I certainly don't hate the idea. And he was being brought up during the trade deadline as well. But like, there are people who can replace Pete's offense per se, but man, like it's really hard to find somebody who
41-20, not easy,
who can change a game like that. And also the idea of being as clutch as he is. For the first half of the season, he led that team and with runners in scoring position. It was well into like the 300s, his batting average with RISP, and he was the only one doing it. And I don't think you can discount that. There are other players. Like I said, I really like Jorge Polanco as an addition to that.
Yeah.
Eugenio Suarez, absolutely fantastic, but I just haven't heard anything to that effect.
I have Laura Albanese here, Mets beat writer for Newsday. Shout out, we got 664 people in this room in the chat. Thank you, Duran Rivera. Hit the likes, hit the subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you for sharing, Brian. I appreciate that. I want to talk about, as we wrap up this show, Steve Cohen. And I put this as Steve Cohen's rant because Mike Puma came out with this article about, the Mets spending and their payroll for next season falling somewhere between 310 to 320 million. Right now, it sits at 305. Now, at the beginning of 2025, it was at 322.6, and it finished at 360. First question, why would the Mets kind of make this public in the middle of free agency? And wouldn't that hurt them in negotiations, with players if they're putting if they put it out there that they're putting a limit on their spending, whether they're doing it or not?
I don't necessarily think that they put it out that they're putting a limit on their spending. I think it was just kind of like an estimate. I would be shocked beyond shocked if their payroll at the beginning of the season is $310 million. And even Steve Cohen said as much to that effect, where he's like, I don't think we're going to be under like 340. I don't think they're spending money just for the sake of spending money, but no, I don't think this is a situation where we're really going to see them go in with 310. 320, maybe. I mean, that's where they were last year and then ballooned up.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I assume that the Mets will shed some. They shed a lot of money, and they're going to see. And one thing I do appreciate about the way that Stearns handles it is that he kind of lets things play out. He doesn't give prescribed roles, especially when it comes to like relief pitchers or anything else. And then when you're hitting like kind of the trade deadline season, he's not shy about being like, okay, so we're going to take on a little bit of extra cash because we really need this piece. That's probably going to happen if they're in it. And frankly, like if I'm looking at the free agents that are left remaining, other than like your top three, like your Bregmans, your Tuckers, your Bellingers, I'm not super enthused about most of them. And if you do that, I think the Mets did a really good job. If I'm allowed to say something nice about them, they did a really good job about building their farm system to the point where I see this team probably improving more via trade than they would than via free agency. And so that obviously mitigates a little bit of the amount of money that you're going to be spending.
And Stearns was also very specific on certain players like Brett Beatty playing third, Carson Bench possibly in the outfield. I mean, you don't really hear that when it comes to the offseason of him. It could be to pump up for trade, but to hear Carson Bench's name like right off the bat as a possible starting, center fielder or left fielder, I think that says a lot when it comes to him wanting to build this roster and how they're going to pay for some of these players.
Yeah, and I actually do believe that they're genuinely very high on Carson Bench right now. I can see him being part of the opening day roster. I mean, obviously, spring training still has to play out, so we don't know quite yet. Brett Beatty, man, Brett Beatty over the last month, like when he got hurt with his oblique injury, towards I think it was like the second to last game or whatever else, there was like reverberations in the clubhouse. Like there was legitimate, just like, oh, it's going to be tough without Brett. And could you imagine that? This is a guy where everyone's like, we don't know if he's that good, he's that good, he's that good, he's struggling, whatever else. And suddenly it's at the end of the season, do or die, and they're like, it's going to be tough without Brett Beatty. And I think he's proven himself. So there are reasons to be high on these young players. I would like to see a little bit more about Carson Bench. I mean, like, it's hard. You're covering the major league team. I'm not up in Syracuse. I'm not seeing these players. I can't like get my eyes on them.
Yeah.
But just from like reports that I've gotten back, this kid seems legit.
Yeah. I want to talk about what Cohen then came out and said, because, and to quote him on X, he goes, as typical, the usual idiots misinterpreting a post article on Mets payroll for 26. I can't imagine our payroll to be lower than last year. It's always hard to predict, but that would be my best guess. Payroll watchers always forget to budget for waiver claims, player movement from minors to majors, and trade deadline moves. That's how it typically works. And then, because some people thought he was talking about the fans, other people thought he was talking about the media. He goes, I was just referring to a few media shills creating a false narrative on spending. I would never dismiss the fans and the emotions they are going through. You work in the media. What do you feel about what he said here?
I am pretty sure I know exactly what he's talking about. So if you could tell, he's not saying that Mike Puma's article is wrong, because Mike Puma's article is accurate. What he's saying is that he was misinterpreted by some of the fan blogs, which it was, because I did see I did see the articles about it. I'm like, oh, they're completely, they do not know how payroll works. So that was kind of like more of his thing. And so that's kind of like the issue when you get into aggregation. So aggregation is essentially taking other people's work and kind of like extrapolating from it without doing your own original reporting. And that is what occurred. And sure, yeah, like the payroll might start at 310 or 320 or whatever, but it did last year too. And then you move guys from the minors to the majors. You do make moves at the trade deadline. The payroll is probably going to be very, very close to 340, 360. That this is just the baseball ecosphere. This is how it's always worked. This is how it's always going to work. And so, but to see like a 305, which is already extremely high, by the way, especially when you consider luxury tax and everything else.
No, it is.
Yeah, just be like, oh, this poverty franchise. That's not what that means.
If we look back, at what we said earlier about how the season ended, $40 million they rose last year, $40 million.
And I would expect the same thing to happen. It's just how baseball works. And I do think it's hard, because if you go like to COTS contracts, to Sport Track, to Fangraphs, and you go through all the other like kind of like portals where you learn a little bit more about contracts and how payroll works, it is not as cut and dry as we are spending $305 million. There, as Steve Cohen indicated, there are extra expenses in kind of like moving players around and acquiring players and everything else. I do not think the Mets are trying to save money. I think they kind of are just in a difficult situation where in a lot of ways it's not a very strong free agent class, and they're trying to figure out how to spend their money wisely.
And I feel like they'll definitely get easily to 320 because they need a starting pitcher. They need another bat or outfielder in this lineup. I mean, they can use another reliever.
I was on Baseball Night in New York and SNY, and they were like, okay, so if it's actually like 310, and I'm like, I reject this premise wholesale. Like, you actually do need players to play baseball, and they don't have enough of them. So they will find some.
Laura, you've given me a lot of your time, and I appreciate that. I just want to get 3 quick questions with you. It could be rapid fire if you want, or you could delve into it. How did the Mets go about bringing a starting pitcher in here?
So, like, I mean, like, I like a Ranger Suarez. He's going to cost a little bit. If you want to kind of go mid tier, you can go for Zach Gallen. He's not going to cost a lot at all. But I mean, like at this point, you can either commit yourself to the young core of the three of Nolan McLean, who in my mind should be untouchable, then Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, or you can kind of move some of these pieces for a guy like a Joe Kelly. You know, there were the trade rumors of Jonah Tong for Joe Kelly. I do not think the Tigers are moving Tariq Skubal as much as everyone wants to think. They're going to move Tariq Skubal. I could be wrong. I've often been wrong. But yeah, the trade market is one of them. Frankly, like I would not mind a Ranger Suarez or even a Zach Allen if you are truly comfortable with the idea that Nolan McLean is going to be legitimate, that Sean Manaea is healthy, and that this one I'm not sure if I believe or not, that Kodai Senga is back to like original Kodai Senga form, which is what David Stearns claims. If you can get like the OG Kodai Senga, that's a big deal.
When he's on, he's on.
Well, he was fantastic. Like when he was good, he was fantastic. The question is, can you trust that he can reclaim that?
Yeah, that's the thing. But the problem is that now you have posed 3 questions to this rotation, which I really want there to be maybe 2 or 1 question to the rotation. Then we haven't even talked about the back end of that, because I obviously Clay Holmes is probably going to be at the end of there, and then you got 2 of them being a part of the World Baseball Classic, and we got to worry about their innings and all that stuff. And
oh yeah, no, it's a mess. I mean, I think we're seeing the writing on the wall though with the way that they're like shoring up that bullpen. They're just like, if it's gonna be 5 innings, then I guess we're gonna have shut down 4 innings. But that doesn't always work, as we learned.
Yeah, no, we'll see how they put this rotation together. The second question I have for you is, do they make a big trade or an impact signing in your eyes?
I think they're going to make one impact signing. I don't know how big that impact is going to be. I do think that
an impact in their eyes, I assume.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because, I hate to parrot what everybody says. It's like, but it's what the market dictates. It's what the market dictates. So there's going to be a situation where maybe they want someone, they can't get them. I am very curious to see what's going to happen if they do go all in on Cody Bellinger. That could be their impact signing. I don't know if it passes a sniff test for me as something that David Stearns would want to do, just looking at Cody Bellinger's numbers and the fact that, like his hard hit rate is like a lot of stuff has gone down, even though he's like produced really, really well. So that's going to be, and he's also a left-handed bat. And I think they did want to get a little bit less left-handed because they were pretty heavily left-handed last year, which they did partially by getting rid of Brandon Nimmo. So there might be one pseudo impact signing. My gut is that we're going to see more via the trade market. I think that the Mets do not prospect hoard just to prospect hoard. I think they did it for a very significant reason, and one of which was to increase their trade capital. So while I believe that Carson Benj and Nolan McLean are off the table, I do not believe anybody else is.
All right, one last thing for me. I think we froze there for a second. But one last question, a prediction here. What do you think the next Mets move is? If you had to predict one, what would you think that they do next?
A trade for a starting pitcher.
Trade for a starting pitcher?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know which one. And I get put on the spot. I'm like, I don't know. But I do think trading for a starting pitcher should be on very top tier of their list. And then God help them, they need to find a first baseman.
That's yes, that is for sure. And an outfielder. I mean,
get an outfielder. And maybe a long relief guy would be really good.
Yeah.
I am here to extol the virtues of the very defunct role of long reliever. Bring back the Aaron Heilmans of the world. They need them.
Or who was it that we had? It was Trevor Williams. He was really good.
He was really like Trevor, like a Robert Gazelman. like type guy, like a guy you just throw in there and be like, hey, you want to throw 3 innings and like make sure your arm doesn't work like in perpetuity? Fantastic, let's go.
Yeah, I think they're trying to do that with Wasker Brazaban. I mean, he
They
did pitch
tried.
multiple innings, and then he was the opener for a while. So,
But he's also 36, 37, I think, at this
yeah.
point. Like maybe I did continue making that joke on Twitter, which is like the world is going to collapse. Like society itself will be on itself. We'll be living in Mad Max, and somewhere Huascar Brazaban is warming up in the bullpen to pitch like 3.5 innings for no reason at all.
Well, that'll be a fun 2026 season if that happens all year long. Laura, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show. Let everyone know what you got coming up, what you're working on, and where they can catch you.
I am on vacation for the first
Nice.
time. I know. It turns out that I have almost 25 vacation days left to burn by the end of the year. Guess what, guys? I can't do that. But I'll be on vacation for the rest of the year. But other than that, you can find me at newsday.com/Mets, my podcast, first time listener, long time caller. And you can catch me on X at Albanese Laura.
Now, since you work in media, I work in radio media too, producing. Our days don't get, we don't get to carry them over. So you got to make sure you take those days when you can.
I forgot.
Well, you also have a long season too. Like, how much baseball, season can you possibly miss there when you got to cover the team for an entire season?
Absolutely. So, I'll be really enjoying not working for all of like
the
5
chat
months.
and the chats loved having you on here. They got so much great stuff to say about you. Shout out to Maureen for the $10 super chat. I appreciate that. And Laura, we'll do this again at some point, whether in the next season or I know you get busy during the season, so it's a little bit harder, but this has been great. And thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
All right. That was Laura Albanese, Newsday Mets beat writer. Really appreciate her for coming on. Just as we wrap up the show, a couple of news and happenings with this team. You got the Mets in the WBC that we mentioned already. Nolan McLean, Clay Holmes representing Team USA. Mark Vientos representing Nicaragua. And you got Francisco Lindor as the captain, I think, of the Puerto Rican team. Juan Soto will be playing left field for the Dominican Republic. Also, Mets designated for assignment Brandon Waddell, but he cleared waivers, so he's going to be sent to AAA last season, 3.45 ERA, as we talked about, as somewhat of a long man opener type player. So maybe he's the long man if the Mets don't decide to bring someone else in. The Mets also claimed catcher Drew Romo from the Orioles. He was the 35th pick in the 2020 MLB draft by the Rockies. Guess more depth at catcher. You got Alvey, you got Terens, you got Sanger. Maybe he's depth there. The Mets also signed Kevin Herget on a minor league deal, another taxi cab pitcher that the Mets will probably bring up, but he was pretty good in 12 innings pitched, a 3 ERA. Mets also signed another Yankee, a minor leaguer, a Dominican prospect. That's actually, he didn't sign just yet, but he will. Wandy Asen, who was initially going to sign with the Yankees, but opted for the Mets. He's the number 2 ranked prospect in the upcoming international class, according to MLB Pipeline. We'll get $3.8 million when the new international signing period opens up on January 15th, 2026. Chris Gross, who's now overseeing the Mets international scouting, helped get this deal done. Guys, appreciate you all for tuning into the show. 827. It blows my mind. You got NFL on right now. We're in the off season. Not much going on in the Mets world, but there was baseball to talk about. And glad to, get into the whole situation with what Steve Cohen had to say. Also the Luke Weaver signing, and Laura's just great to begin with, and it's always good talking with her. So appreciate you all for being a part of this. Every single one. If I named you all, it would take forever, but from deep down from my heart, I appreciate everyone for being a part of this show and being a part of Subway to Shea just to begin with, and subscribing. I don't know what's going to happen next week. If the Mets don't make any moves, or if there's nothing going on, I probably will take next Sunday off for the holiday, and then we'll come back fresh on the new year. I don't know. We will be here Sunday morning at 10, unless we need to change the scheduling around. We had to change a little bit of the scheduling around to get the guest on, to get Laura on. So tonight, which worked out great for us. But again, if there's nothing happening, we'll probably take next week off, take a break, come back to start the new year and get ready for the 2026 season. But I just want to wish everyone a happy holidays. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you're celebrating Hanukkah, I don't know if Hanukkah's over with yet, but if, whatever you're celebrating, happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. We will be back full, ready to go, ready for Subway to Shea to head into the 2026 season. You can follow Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You could also follow me personally at Ant Rivera 86. If you want to listen to the podcast, which will be up probably around midnight, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be a part of the conversation, and you want to be a part of this live show, as 866 of you were a part of, you're doing that right here on YouTube. That's where it's at. You could be a part of the chat. I'll get to as many comments as possible. I'll let you know right now, it is very hard to go through a chat with now has close to 900 people and try to get everyone in. So I have to somewhat, filter comments and get to as many as possible. But know that I see them, know that I'm looking at them, and I will do my best to get to as many as I can. But make sure you're doing that as you subscribe on YouTube. You could also do it on X, but you want to be a part of the YouTube channel. That's where it's at. That's where the fun's at. So appreciate everyone. Thank you so much. Have a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Whatever you celebrate. Hope you all enjoy. For Anthony Rivera, this has been the Subway to Shea podcast. And always remember, let's go Mets.